in real time.
My
I'm going to
mom's
go
watching.
ahead and get us started here because I don't want to waste any more time not hearing from our guests. So, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Liberty, and I'm a member of the Firestorm Collective. And this afternoon for some of us anyway, we're excited to be hosting Rattling the Cages co-creator Eric King in conversation with former political prisoners and George Jackson Brigade members Janine Bertram and Mark Cook. Just a little background, Firestorm Books, where I'm hosting from, is a 16-year-old radical bookstore owned and operated by a queer feminist collective in Southern Appalachia on the land of the Cherokee people. We got several more virtual events in the works, including a March 31st conversation between prison abolitionist Dean Spade and writer Kai Chang Tom. So definitely check out our website, and I'll put a link in the chat if you're interested in signing up for that. So just a note, we are using Zoom's webinar platform today, and there's both an open chat that you're welcome to use and a Q&A tool. If you have questions for Mark and Janine, just want to encourage you to put those questions in the Q&A so that Eric or I can make sure to pull from those at the end and answer as many of them as possible. You're also welcome to use the chat, but we might not have our eyes on it. Okay, great. Well, we're going to get started. Just want to give a little bit of background information on our speakers today. First up, Janine Bertram was active in Seattle area queer and leftist communities in the 1960s and 70s. She co-founded the Seattle chapter of Coyote, which is Call Off Your Old Tired Ethics. Hopefully we'll hear a little more about that, and worked to collectivize the group. Janine was a member of the George Jackson Brigade and spent over 4 years in prison for political work. The majority of her imprisonment was at FCI Pleasanton. And in prison, she helped to found the first US prison parenting program and made it a collective with women of all races participating. She also held small study groups, reading and discussing George Jackson's work. And Janine was heavily involved in the disability rights movement and helped pass the ADA. Her activism in disability justice and rights continues to this day, and we're so blessed to have you here with us. Janine, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Mark Cook co-founded the first prison chapter of the Black Panther Party at Walla Walla State Penitentiary in Washington and worked tirelessly on behalf of prisoners' rights. Mark was a member of the George Jackson Brigade in the Pacific Northwest during the 1970s and spent 4 decades behind bars, more than half of it for his political work. The majority of Mark's imprisonment was in federal facilities. And now in his 80s, Mark continues to be active and involved in movement work. Mark, thank you so much for being here with us. Last but not least, Eric King is a father, poet, author, and activist. In December 2023, he was released from the Supermax ADX prison after spending nearly 10 years as a political prisoner for an act of protest over the police murder of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. He was held in solitary confinement for years and was met with violence by guards throughout his incarceration. Eric has published 3 zines, Battle Tested, Antifa in Prison, and Pacing in My Cell. And his sentencing statement is included in the book Defiance, Anarchist Statements Before Judge and Jury. Eric now works as a paralegal for the Bread and Roses Legal Center. Eric, thanks for being here and also for making this incredible series happen. And also, as always, just want to give a shout out to Josh Davidson, the co-editor and co-creator of Rattling the Cages, who does so much behind the scene work to make this happen. So thank you, Josh. And I think on that note, it's time to pass it off. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Eric, I think you can take it away.
Awesome. Janine, Mark, thank you so much. We got a nice little crowd adding up too, so I appreciate that as well to everyone watching. So I want to start with just a brief thing about the George Jackson Brigade and your involvement with it. When I was inside, I received 2 books about you all, and it was just wildly influential to me. So if you could both just briefly talk about what the George Jackson Brigade was to you, how you came to join it, and just give us a little rundown of your experience with it. We can start with you, Mark.
The brigade, okay, the George Jackson Brigade rose from the name of George Jackson, the field marshal of the Black Panther Party. Uh, it was based mostly on his writings. Myself, I just was a member of the Black Panther Party, and I used a 10-point program as my guide, the work I did inside of prison. I started doing the prison support work before I joined the brigade. And it was based mostly on the fact that prisoners were getting screwed over behind their work, their abilities, in not getting paid for anything. In fact, it was a continuation of slavery, which it amounts. There's no such thing as nice slavery. You may get the good job inside, but it's still slavery. And we're entitled to have, should have the right to say how much we want to sell our labor for, et cetera, just like anybody else outside who belongs to a union or just organized workers. And so I carried that over as far as when I joined the brigade. Some of the work that was doing that inspired me was that they did support the labor movement inside of prison, the prisoners themselves. And of course, the most publicized one was the blowing up the Department of Corrections. And that was before I joined the brigade. This was in state of Washington. The prisoners were being oppressed in solitary confinement, et cetera. And they wrote letters to various news media outside, try to get some kind of attention to what was going on. So there's no way they could get the attention. So what the brigade did was wrote a memo, a newsletter to the public saying what was going on. And to get their attention, they bombed the Department of Corrections in the Capitol. That got everybody's attention. And immediately they got rid of the warden, got some of the prison guards out, pulled people in solitary confinement out of solitary confinement. That really impressed me. The whole thing, like, that was solid to my continuation of the work I was doing. I started a convention, which had the right to speak as a provision, and prisoners' rights as laborers inside. Those were the two main things I started with convention. And
did the Panthers have you check us out or check the brigade out?
Oh yeah, well, this is later on when they found out when I was well, yeah, just before I joined the brigade, they asked what the brigade was about. I told them about that. And I told them how they were following through on the second provision of the Black 10 points of the Black Panther Party was that everybody should be able to have work. And it was just a continuation. I joined it because that's the main things I was doing: the right to vote and the right to have privileges or in work.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go on and on. So I've been given a clue. Cut it off here and let you ask more questions.
Janine, how about you? What led you there, and what were your experiences like?
Well, I joined the brigade later than other people, and when I first heard and read about the brigade, I thought they were offending workers. But it turned out there was a huge strike of women's electrical workers, and at that point in time, and the brigade did an action at Laurelhurst, New Year's Eve, a bombing, and in fact, the workers loved it, or many of the workers loved it. And so it made me
Is that the electrical bombing, or which one was that?
Pardon? It was
The Seattle City Light one.
It was a Seattle City Light bombing of.
Okay, yeah, that's why I consider the electrical one. Yeah.
Yeah. And because the workers, we talked to people on the picket line, and this was before I joined the brigade, and they really appreciated Laurelhurst. And so that made me reassess what I felt about armed struggle, and joined the brigade after that, because I knew I had worked with two brigade members and had met Mark beforehand.
And you said you had met Mark inside?
Well, I meant Mark
Well,
outside.
do that.
He-
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
halfway
okay.
house. That's what we meant. Yeah.
Oh, right, you
Right.
were in the halfway house, and that was something that broadened my consciousness about racism was when they sent you back to prison.
Yeah.
Um, just the injustices were huge, and I wanted to take action against them.
I hope everyone watching and everyone who watches in the future takes note of the fact that they attacked the prison system. And we could use some more diversity of tactics today. So Mark and Janine, could you both just tell us briefly what led to your, like Mark in your case, the political prisoner sentence, and then Janine for your time in prison? Like what charges got you landed inside? And Janine, you can start.
Eric, I don't remember specifically what my charges were, but it was something. It's a long time ago.
Was it the bank robbery?
I think it was conspiracy to rob banks and explosives.
Okay. And how much time did you receive?
10 years.
And then you did 4 of it?
Yeah.
Okay. And Mark, what about you? What was your political prisoner case?
Well, the George Jackson Brigade, according to Ed Mead, had robbed a bank, and they ended up getting busted. One was killed. Bruce Seidel was killed, and 2 others, John Sherman and Ed Mead, were locked up in prison in Seattle. And the brigade decided to help them out. In other words, free both of them, but they had to make a choice. They couldn't do both at the same time. There was a old part of the brigade that we don't really associate that much, but when they heard what happened, they wanted to come immediately and help get Ed Mead out. But the story was they had to get John out. So I was chosen as one of the people to help pull this whole thing off. So the brigade, without giving names, we had all the materials we needed. We had a place to put John, but after we got him out of prison, etc. So I confronted the police. Well, John had been shot in the jaw in the bank robbery, and his jaws were wired together. And so they'd take him to the hospital regularly to have that checked on at the King County Hospital, not far from the jail. And so we had planned to intercede at the hospital and tell the officer we're taking you a prisoner and leave just like that. But it didn't quite go off that easy. The guard with him lowered his hand, supposedly after the fact. They say he was trying to get to his keys, but it looked like he was going for his gun. And so I just pulled the trigger. The cop dropped. He didn't die. He dropped it. You know, it's kind of an exciting thing to hear, but it's a stomach turner at the times. I just wasn't used to that. It didn't go as smoothly as we thought.
Sure.
He was taken by the other brigade members off to a safe house, and I returned to my family. I was a single father at the time. I had a kid. He was I think he's about 10 years old at the time.
And how much time did you receive for that?
I did was it 24 years for that? Yeah, in the federal system, and later on about 4 or 5 more years in the state system. Behind the thing, I was tried by both the state and the feds.
Oh, okay.
And all of the white members of the brigade who were arrested got out long before Mark.
Yeah, and that was expected before I got involved in it. We said if we ever did get locked up or approached by the police, that I'd be treated differently than them. And there was no big surprise when I did get locked up. It was a long time. I got support from, they did their time, they got out, they supported me, along with a lot of the community continued to support me, which was surprising. And they took care of my son, of course, and they brought him to every prison I was put in as they rotated. I was rotated 17 times in the federal system, and they brought my son each time to each prison from the time he was 9 years old, and he grew up. He had a son, and he'd bring his son, and with grandfather, son, and the dad here. So that was connection I had, the support I had during the time I was in prison. And every prison, I met political prisoners.
Well, we're going to get to
that. Puerto Rican, the white black nationalists, just various prisoners, Native Americans, And these are all political prisoners at the time. In fact, Leonard, I just sent Leonard, we sent Leonard $1,000 just a while ago after he got out. So we continue our support of Black prisoners.
So that leads me into one of our questions. When you all went inside, it seems like there was a plethora of other political prisoners. Like that was a time when there was a lot of revolutionary activity. So if you could, Janine, I'll start with you. If you could just talk to us about different political prisoners you met inside and your abilities to like make friendships or organize or just be together and what that was like.
I met a few political prisoners. There was one person that was from the Weather Underground. I think people came in to the prison because there were only 2 federal women's prisons at that time, and so they had to send people to FCI Pleasanton.
What was the other one? Dansbury or whatever?
Alderson.
Oh, okay.
Which
Okay.
is where Bo was for her entire time. But I met independistas, some indigenous women, and one person from the Weather Underground, and it was really good to have those connections inside. And then just a few months before I got out, they brought one of the brigade members to that prison, and that was really good too.
Yeah.
We had never been the best of friends even in the brigade, but we were quite glad to see each other at that point in time.
Did you bond closer inside?
Yes, certainly closer in a way, although when you're underground, you do bond.
Okay. And then with the other women that you spent time with, did you all do anything together inside? Did you live together? Did you do crafts together? Or was it just like seeing each other and respecting one another?
Oh no, I mean, we didn't do anything formally, like study groups or something like that, but we certainly spent time together on the yard.
Okay. Was there any racial divides in that prison at that time? Like who you could live with, who you could eat with, things like that?
No, not set up by the state.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
I mean, certainly there was racism among prisoners, but
Sure. And Mark, you were at 1,000 different prisons. Can you start with telling us like where you first landed in the feds and then other political prisoners that you met and grew close with or just got to know?
Well, first of all, I was sent to Leavenworth, and the warden or superintendent, he's a warden, I guess, at Leavenworth, didn't want me in that prison. So I know I was sent by the court and I had a long term to go, but he didn't want me. So they sent me to Georgia. That was another federal prison. And while I was down there, I met some of the political prisoners, Picarillo from a group out in the Northeast. There was Dawood. He was a Panther. And there was, I can't remember all their names right now, but there's many I met just in that prison alone. But there was so many killings at the time I showed up. I didn't stay there very long. They shipped out 3 busloads of us, about 30 to each bus, to scatter us around the United States to thin down the political prisoners. That was called the Atlantic migration. I ended up back at Leavenworth, where the warden did not want me, and they told me they're going to take me as I was. There was going to be no rejection at all. I told the warden that, so they locked me up there in solitary confinement for a while till people outside, my support people, told them what they were doing, and they finally let me out into the population, which had many political prisoners there. They were the Puerto Ricans, or the Black Panthers, or AIM people. That's where I met Standing Deer and Leonard Peltier. And we were able to get together. Huh? Go ahead. You were getting ready to say.
I was just going to say, I think I saw a picture of you, Leonard, and Tom Manning together, but I might be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure I did.
John Lawman. Yeah, there's a great many of us all. Yeah, we've gathered up. We had one of our comrades who ran the Photoshop. He was Larry Giddings. He was an anarchist out of California. They did a prison break in Seattle. But got the three other people out and had a shootout with the police. Anyways, they had ended up inside, and his job was to work in the Photoshop. So people who wanted to send photos home to their parents, etc., they get the single shots, But he had called us up all at once and put the word out in the yard, get all of the political prisoners at that time, and they were taking these pictures. And so there's a lot of these pictures that have been taken and kind of distributed around the country now. And we got together. We had lots of time to talk about errors we made, and success, also the successes we had. And it was we're kind of building on a movement. We thought we were building on a movement that would continue long after we got out, but it kind of dwindled, as you know, and turned into something else. A lot of the people we knew that had passed away, and a lot of new people were born after the movement, so they really didn't know, and so they're getting their word from okay.
No, I didn't say anything.
Okay.
No, I'm into it. You don't have to. You can keep going on that.
Oh.
That's
You
good.
keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. But then, anyways, that Leavenworth was the first place I went to when Larry Giddings came to the prison. He was a youngster at the time, very young, and I gave him his clothes and other stuff. The things that a prisoner needs when he goes to prison. When I got there, they did the same thing. When I showed up, immediately, prisoners gave to me and got all the essentials I need to get started off in prison.
Was Larry Giddings, was that Bill Dunn's co-defendant?
Yeah, that was Bill Dunn's.
Okay, yeah.
And
Awesome.
it's sad to say he was strong in prison. He was strong to a point, but they broke him eventually, and it's sad to say. But we met him after he got out. He only lives about maybe 2 blocks from me, and I'd go up and visit him, and we'd talk, and I tried to get him involved with the movement on the street, but they had broken. They told him they'd lock him up if he got, etc. But anyways, it's a sad story. But he was strong while he was inside. He never rolled over on anybody other than himself, And that happened to several prisoners. It wasn't all that easy to spend 10 and 20 years inside a prison, away from your families and friends. And okay, but anyways, I'll leave you there. It's a piece of the story.
When I was inside, racial politics was huge. Like they would really, really push violence if you were like on race trader time or co-mingling. Was that Mark, was that your situation there? Like, were you allowed to like basically have white comrades or eat with white people or other races?
A lot of the political prisoners were of different colors,
Yeah.
Latinos, Puerto Ricans, blacks, whites. The ones who were on the left, we got together. We ate at the same table. We did what we wanted to do. Nobody really messed with it, It was, and we also we contended with the Aryan Brotherhood and the KK and the bikers and people like that. There was a respect between us as prisoners, but we weren't on the same path as far as the struggle went. I only stayed at Leavenworth for about I think it was about 3 years, and they decided to transfer me. But I found out they were doing they call that the transit therapy. I think it was.
You call it diesel therapy when I was in.
Yeah, they kept moving. So they moved me to Lompoc. Then they moved me to I can't remember all the names, but I did list them. I wrote a good diagram of where I was, what I did while I was in prison, working in school, etc. The people I had met. So
were they all federal persons?
These were most of them were federal prisoners. Later on, they brought some from California. They had riots in California prisoners, and they sent them into the federal system. There was also people lived on the islands. I guess they were Americans. I'm not sure, but they did send them into the federal prison. Yeah. We had one they had kidnapped in Italy. He's a so-called terrorist, and they brought him over to America and locked him in. That was common, where they bring foreign prisoners and put them in the federal penitentiary. But that's another part of the story. But they transferred me 17 times.
Janine, I want to talk about family and community support. Right now I see like there's lots of abolitionist movements, there's books through bars, just different ways to support those inside. when you were in, what was your level of support like? Did the community show up for you? Did family show up for
It
you?
was huge. It
Really?
was huge. Yeah. And
Tell me about it.
pretty much everybody. I mean, there might have been 3 people in the entire, whoops. We're having a little canine interruption here. Anyway, there maybe was 3 people I knew of that didn't support me, and I got huge support from the Seattle community, from the California community, from my family, from everybody. I mean, people even sent money and put them on my books. It was amazing, I thought.
Were you all allowed, like in Pleasanton, were you allowed to have like books, magazines, newspapers, everything like that?
Yeah, pretty much. Although, I mean, I found out later, but the mailroom was definitely just throwing away some anarchist papers.
As they will.
They even let the Marxist-Leninists through, but.
There's a book called the Turner Diaries. Now it's a racist story, you know. I don't know if you've read yeah, and that's the only book they try to censor me. If I file a complaint, you know, that they let us have the what you call it, the Hitler's book, the Mein Kampf, yeah, the dumb coffee in there, yeah, and some other books, but from the Klan, you know, Klan, and a lot of the racist groups in the South, but they wouldn't let Black prisoners have the Turner Diary.
Weird.
Yeah, and so I did file my legal complaint, and finally they just gave up on me and let me have the book. But I was a jailhouse lawyer, and I did some pretty good work, and I got people out, and we changed some of the law, but a lot of it turned into.
Wait, I want to ask you that later.
Okay, well, I'll leave the good.
I want to get to it. Janine, real quick before I switch over, what was the phone and visiting situations like in your institution? Were you allowed unlimited calls, unlimited visits? What was that like?
Unlimited calls. I mean, as long as you weren't occupying all the phone all the time, there were other prisoners that needed to use it. And people had to get on a visitors list, but yeah, we could have, during visiting hours, we could have as many people on our lists as could come in.
So there wasn't the 300 minutes a month or anything like that that they have now. Man, God bless. Thank goodness. So Mark, I don't even know if any of us remember the question, but did you have like the same amount of support from the outside world in your family?
Oh, I had great support. Little support from my family. I mean, I had my sister, my son, and niece. They wrote me regularly, but I had a lot of support from Seattle, from the Panthers, in fact, from around the world. Surprisingly, yeah. They were doing their highway strikes in Germany and in New England, and most of them were anarchist, Black Cross anarchist people, and a lot of support from them.
And you got support from Asada.
I got support from good old Asada.
Oh shit!
Well, that's Asada after I got out, but we kind of knew each other. Rita and Asada had settled together at one point, so we connected a kind of family relationship. When they sent her to Cuba, you know, we knew the whole route when they busted her out of jail and sent her over there. And I think she was kind of interested in me because later on, I mean, I had busted somebody out of jail too. So it was kind of a brother-sister relationship. I got an awful sweet letter from her, and I've kept it for all these years. So.
Where was Rita and Asada celled together?
Alderson,
prisoner.
FCI Alderson in West Virginia.
Oh.
Yeah, like I said, there were only 2 women's prisons, so you were either in Alderson or, except for, I'm sorry, there's one person that's asked not to be associated with the brigade, but anyway, they kept her in jail in San Diego for years.
Interesting.
Because there were only 2 prisons, and Bo was in one and I was in the other one.
Yeah. Okay. Marilyn Buck had joined the group that busted Asada out of jail. Okay. And took the route down to Belize and over to Cuba. In fact, we kind of follow that route in our minds too. Like if I leave the United States now, I'm going to follow that same route. If I can get across the borders, you know, they got to be blocked north and south now. But something slipped. I had something going on in my mind just a minute ago, and it just got away from me. I'm
I
sorry.
had no idea that they
Oh,
stopped at
next question.
Mark,
Okay.
I want to know about kind of the same stuff I asked Janine. Was the phone situation and the book situation the same there, except for the Turner Diaries?
Yeah, pretty much the same. We had 15 minutes on the phone. They had, a couple thousand people in prison, so you had to wait your turn in men's prisons.
Yeah.
There was nobody ever blocked. Sometimes they would censor you if you were on the phone talking. Most of the time they did. One incident where somebody didn't went over their time and he wouldn't come out when another prisoner was knocking on the wall. He killed a guy, ended up doing solitary confinement. Yeah, Silverstein was his name. Solitary confinement in
You
Leavenworth
there
prison.
with Silverstein?
Huh?
You were there when Silverstein was there?
Yeah, I was on the yeah. And I kind of lost a piece of that right there.
I'm
Huh.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut
but,
you off.
but yeah, anyways, it was a struggle. I mean, we respected each other, but there were some people that tried to, bulldog, pressure the younger prisoners, and it was a fight getting on the phone a lot of time. You just almost had to know if you had your name on the list, we'd look out for you, make sure you got on the phone. The political prisoners were very strict on that. Support other people. We're the ones that filed most of the grievances. We had our great anarchist, what was Gamboa? He was a great anarchist in the federal system. He wrote a book, The Black Anarchist. I don't know if you read that one, but
I did.
gave me my first impression of what an anarchist was. No, that was my first impression. My first impression was from Standing Deer. That's Leonard's partner. They were both Sioux. He was an anarchist, and he gave me the best impression of what an anarchist should be. So,
Oh,
I'm not knocking Bo. Bo was part of the brigade, and it was divided. It was not a solid single person running. It was Leonard, Marxist-Leninists, Panthers. There was anarchists, and so it was all split up that way. We got together great. We just did our job. Everybody knew what their job was to do, and we got the jobs done.
prison seems so different back then. There's so much solidarity and like respect for each other back then, it seems. What was the clothes situation? Because sometimes I see pictures and it looks like people are wearing like almost their own clothes. Were you able to do that, both of you?
Yes.
Yeah, our recreational clothes, it let us do that. In Leavenworth, I mean, the federal men's system, we were giving surplus Army clothes.
Oh, okay.
Mostly the olive colored clothes,
Mhm.
And Janine, you were able to get in like your own, you said?
Yep.
So how did that work? Would your family or friends just mail it in and then they'd search it, or?
Yes, but we were allowed, I think, 3 or 4 packages a year. And that was how you got your clothes.
That's so neat. So the next big question, I guess, I'd like to know about how the administrations interacted with you. If there was repression, if they were worse to you than other prisoners, if they did things intentionally to make your time worse. So basically, like, how are you treated by the guards and the administration?
For me, the guards were, it depended on the various guards. There were some that didn't like political prisoners, and so they would be a little bit more repressive. But for the most part, I didn't have any hassles from the administration or the guards.
Okay. Sweet.
But of course, I would have fought it, so
Yes.
they don't like that.
Jenny, were you there? But because I believe like Marilyn and Susan and Laura, they were all at Dublin also. Were you there before them?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was before. Yeah,
Yeah. That's awesome.
that's one of my regrets.
One of the thoughts that slipped me a while ago was Marilyn Buck that had helped break Asada out. When it's time for her to get out, Ed and I had contributed $15,000. Was it? I think it was for her release when she got out. We went down to Oakland. They had a big party for her. A lot of people contributed money, and so from the brigade, we gave them all that money, and we were going to give $100 a year for each year a political prisoner stayed inside. This is after we got out of prison. And I know you're talking about while we're in prison, but I just wanted to get that by, that we did things like that. Even for Larry Giddings, guy who got broken while he's in prison, we even gave him $1,000 when he got out. And like I say, just recently we did it, Leonard Pilter the same way. So we're looking out, we look out for people, it's a long time. And a lot of people have forgotten us and forgotten them inside, but we'll never forget them. Okay.
Are there still political prisoners that you all are actively supporting today?
Yeah.
Like that are still inside?
As much as we can. Yeah. We don't have the money we had before, most of our support went to the California prisoners at one time, but that's a totally separate story. After we got out, and we did some miraculous work down there, and the prisoners that did too. Yeah.
I want to hear more about Rita being friends with Asada and then you all being friends with Asada. That's wild history.
I kind of missed that. Is sound going down?
Asada.
What?
Rita and
Oh,
Asada's
oh.
relationship.
Or yours too, Mark, like either one.
They were, I didn't really have a relationship with Asada, although I at one point got a letter through to her. So telling her how much her writings meant to me when I was in prison. But Rita, I talked to me a lot about Asada. And in fact, while I was in, I heard that Rita had a lover. And so I was quite jealous and upset with that and angry and let her know that. And then she told me who her lover was, and I was thrilled. Because it was Asada. I mean, that was a great connection for her to have.
Well, yeah, well, I never had socializing inside, so I didn't get none of the goodies. But anyway.
Janine, did you just say that Rita and Asada were partners inside?
Yes.
Were you and Rita, were you all together at that time?
Yeah, I mean, we were together until we were arrested.
Oh, okay. Dang. And Mark, what was your interactions with Asada like?
I didn't have really an interaction. She was a Panther, a Black Panther. We supported each other from prison to prison. In fact, outside of that, we had a circle. I even forgot you were part of the circle.
Yes.
Where while we're in prison, we were able to write each other illegally. They didn't want us to communicate, so we changed our names, and that pretty much did it. So I just used my initials, and I sound like Emmy, M-E-C.
Mm-hmm.
So I was known as Emmy, and Ed Beatty was known as Grace. And I don't know.
Remember, but
Yeah.
Name too.
And there was Therese was called Calico.
That's right.
Yeah. And both, yeah. We were able to communicate in this circle. Yeah. Getting outside the areas. And when it come time for Ed to leave, we were supposed to never be put together, me and Ed. Ed
were
was
at Sheridan together, right?
Huh?
Were you guys at Sheridan together?
That was the last time, yeah. That's where they made the mistake. They put us together.
So I don't know if everyone watching will know this, but there have been members of the brigade that we've lost over time, either early in the days or even recently with Ed and Bo. Are there any special memories you all would like to just bring up or talk about, or just things that you feel about your lost comrades?
After prison, I associated with most everybody except John Sherman. I went down to California in Castro area. I think it was near Oakland, something like that. And I met Therese. Me and Therese hooked up there. We wrote letters back and forth till I got a chance to go down there during our Panther. Every 10 years or 5 years, something like that. All the Panthers in the United States would try to meet. We'd meet down there in Oakland. So I met with her down there. And over in Oakland, I'd go to see Bo all the time. Several times in Oakland, I'd meet with Bo. And of course, Ed and I went before Ed came to Seattle, back to Seattle, I went down to San Francisco and met him and his partner down there. Never associated with John. There was a kind of an internal thing there. Leave that alone. Ed met with him and visited him. I've met with other prisoners. The Attica brothers, for instance, coming over. I met with big black, and we actually got pictures together, and the Native American movement person over out of Attica came over, and I was interested really in what they were doing after they got out of prison, because when I got out of prison, I immediately went into prisoner support programs, but they were doing mostly speaking at seminars and things. They were building a program like I thought they would. I was really impressed the way they put things together inside that prison. That was during the Attica Rebellion. That was one of the best things I ever saw in my life. The way they could come together and discard all the aggravations they had with each other in race and other thing else. They come together that way. I've seen that happen again in California. Me and Ed spurred that on. They got it going in California. Same thing, where everybody came together. They had the same grievances, and so they stuck together, and they made this agreement to have no more aggression against each other's gangs or races while this was going on. So, yeah. Okay.
Janine?
Well, I'm just blabbing on that.
No, this is badass. I want to hear all this stuff.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm not knocking you or nothing, but I always look to you for a little support.
And she's right there supporting.
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. We were talking to Emily.
What was the question? I can't
The,
remember.
the question was if you wanted to talk about the members that you all lost or
Oh.
any special memories you had with them, like
I
impressions about them even.
Yeah, I don't really have, I mean, I have a lot of memories. I miss Ed is the most recent brigade member to leave the planet. And we all spent quite a bit of time together. And also, I guess I just mainly want to say that my comrades are people that I absolutely down to my core can totally trust. And I mean, there is no way I'll get stabbed in the back. It's wonderful to have connections to humans where you have that kind of relationship.
Yeah.
And certainly with both Rita and Ed I had that with Bruce Seidel. I had never met.
Yeah.
So I didn't know him at all, but they're important relationships and they're really strong people. And Rita, for example, when I got together with Rita, or when we met each other as friends, and I was doing Coyote, and she and Therese were doing this prison program at the women's prison, Women Out Now. And Rita, it let me know what a racist I was. I mean, I don't mean I was an outrageous racist, but I'd grown up white. And
It's like internalized stuff.
Yeah. And I didn't understand that at all. And I feel like that was a fairly important lesson.
Yeah.
So, but she had this very direct way of talking that wasn't hostile. And I think that's something a lot of us don't have skills. I don't have very good skills that way. And she did.
I am still working on that.
Uh-huh.
So did you all stay friends consistently like the entire time post release and everything?
Yeah, she was living in California, and Teresa's living in California, so it was limited contact, but whenever I was down there, I would see them, or I would see Rita, and once in a while I would see Therese.
What about Ed?
Oh yeah, Ed we were in contact with, and when he got out, we were in contact with and worked on Mark's defense committee.
I'd like to hear more about that.
The Great Defense Committee. They got a little bloody in their advertising. They did this picture with a pistol with blood dripping from it,
No, that wasn't a good idea.
And I said, no. Me and Therese said, no, that's a bad idea, Ed. But he was strongly in support of us. I'll never forget Ed. I mean, that's to my last days, and it was just a couple of years ago that he passed away. And I got his cane. He gave me his cane. He said if I die, I could have his cane. I know it's not very nice, but when he was dying, no, after he had died, I went to his part of his wife and said, Ed said I got to have his cane. And I forgot, oh, what am I doing? And I saw she just kind of ignored me and I walked away. And I came up another day and she handed me his cane. But anyways, I was close to Ed and uh, Bo too. I went down when I went down to see Bo the day before she died. Her mind really wasn't there. She'd look at me and have to look, and we had to keep asking her questions over and over again. Her partner was taking care of her, and she asked, "What are you going to tell Janine?" I'm sending a message through me back to Janine here in Seattle, where I'm in Oakland, and she said, "What are you going to tell Janine when you see her?" She wouldn't say. We kept asking her the question, and finally she said, "Tell Janine I love her," and that was it. And she died the next day. In fact, I think she died that night, and I was in the motel getting ready to go back home. And I'll always remember her. I mean, she was a real trip. I mean, she's a worker. She got things done. She's the one that took me inside a women's prison for the first time in my life, and got me hooked up with women out now. All the movements in Seattle, and then there was Ed, who had his. Ed was a real underground person. He shouldn't have lived above ground. I don't know why, but he was great. He had the mind. He had the mind for propaganda, building bombs. I mean, he had the movement, everything. And I just couldn't stay away from him until the day he died. I was with him, and he died too. He had fallen the day before, broke some bones. It's so painful he couldn't move, and they had to get somebody outside to give him enough morphine to get him into bed. But the next day, I went up to see him and to talk to him, and he couldn't talk. I just remembered all the road trips we did together,
Yeah, that's really sweet. Thank you both for sharing those things. Janine, you brought it up a little bit at the beginning. Do you want to talk to us more about what Coyote was and like what it meant to you?
Well, when I was becoming a feminist, I realized that at least in that era, women had to be either virgin queens or French whores. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, and so I heard about Coyote, which had been started by Margot St. James in San Francisco. And that was the work I wanted to do, organizing. I was in the LGBTQ community at the time, and I wanted to decriminalize prostitution, now called sex workers. And it means a lot to me to change societal attitudes and make revolution. So Coyote was part of that.
Do you feel like where we're at now compared to where Coyote was then? Do you see a big progress? Do you see it returning? Do you see it only moving forward in regards to these issues?
I hope it moves forward. In some ways, it seems like it's moving backwards. And I'm not talking about the movement, but if you look at general media, it seems to be getting more racist, more sexist, more backwards. And I think my hope is that means people will be encouraged to organize and develop and fight it.
Yeah. Mark, I would like to ask about your time in prison in your first case, like before you became a political prisoner. If you could talk about Walla Walla and like how you organized within that prison.
Yes.
I want to hear all about it too. Like don't hold back.
Yeah.
About taking over the prison.
Well,
Please.
it didn't happen that way. My first activism was against racism in the laundry in the workplaces, and it was something I was, really strong in my heart against. And when I struck out, they threw me in the hole. They wanted me to talk. I wouldn't talk to anybody. I wouldn't give them a reason why I did what I did. But when I came out, I kind of got the pat on the back by prison. I was like, at least you tried. But another instance came up where prisoners they had a choice to pick movies. This was in the early time. The prisoners could pick movies, whether you're black or white or Native Americans. Your group could pick the next movie that's going to be shown on Friday night. So they picked a movie called 100 Rifles. You might have heard of that. And Jim Brown and Raquel Welch. And the racist prisoners said, no, that's not going to be shown in here. So we just pressed it. We said, we're going to see your movie. We're not coming out of our cells. So that was the begin of my political action inside a prison. And as we went, we finally it ended up locking the prison down because we wouldn't come out of the cells. The white prisoners that went to work for a while. Then they came and said, no, we're going to go along with you. And in my mind, it said, this is a prisoners' movement, a workers' movement. It's we're a working class. And this is what started focusing. I started reading and trying to put things together. And later on, I met my buddy, Clement Blanchie, and he said, we got to start a Panther group in here. And I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, I'll write to Oakland and see. And they gave us a chapter. It's not a chapter. We're the second chapter outside of Oakland to start a Panther group. Seattle was the first one. Seattle Panthers were the first one, and we were the second one. And so we had a 10-point program. Second point was about workers. Stuck with that. That was my main theme. I worked along struggling with everybody else. And I had this grievance against the warden. I can't remember what it was about, but I was determined to kill the warden when I was in prison. So in the work plan, I was spray painting, and there was some materials back there. I started getting pipes stuff together, and I was scraping match heads off. They used to give us cigarettes and matches, and I was filling up that. And I figured nobody knew what I was doing. I'm behind this place where I do the painting. It was called a waterfall.
Making a pipe bomb?
Yeah. And the Canadians came up to me and said, hey, we know what you're doing. Don't do that. And we got come to us, and I want to talk to you. So I was on the yard one time, big yard where everybody goes out for recreation, and they're against the wall playing chess. And I go over and talk to them. They said, if you keep your mouth shut, we'll give you something bigger than that bomb. And so, yeah. And so I said, okay, we'll give you some help if you give us some help. Now, these were two Canadians. There was a Mexican guy and a Native American guy sitting in this little group here. It said, don't tell anybody what I'm telling you right now, and don't tell anybody if you get involved with this. We'll hurt you. And so these are my friends. So I said, okay, tell me a little further what you're doing. So they told me they were running this illegal underground newspaper. It was called The Bomb. How they made it, they had read some story by ex World War II prisoners of war in Germany. In order to escape, they needed identification, printed identification. So they invented this little press, how to make this thing. They're doing this in Germany. So they showed me how we could do it in the prison and get away with it. We had all these pieces together. I don't want to go through the specific points right now, but we did put the press together, and we printed grievances that were going on in prison that everybody could identify with. You didn't have to be black, white, or anything else. The grievances were the same. You couldn't wear hair on your face, no mushes, no sideburns. You had to wear long hair, etc. So we told them that's one of the grievances. We're going to tell the prisoners. Eventually, as we worked on this newsletter, to start shaving off growing all your hair, growing all the hair you can grow, the hair on your head, long hair, etc. So all prisoners do it. We encouraged the head of our inmate advisory council, Big Don Cole, told him we wanted to do the same thing. He made a picket sign. So he walked around the yard with this picket sign saying that you can't grow hair, So everybody in the penitentiary was growing hair. There's no violation. They couldn't lock anybody up. So this is another move. This is the propaganda move. And I noticed that it was called The Bomb. I said, I wish we had a real bomb, but it's called a bomb. But it was successful in what we were doing. We eventually, through this underground, control the prisoners. We wrote their constitution to change the way they were behaving and the way the government the prison was treating them. And the prison agreed with us writing this memorandum, trying to make changes. We told them when we did it, we'd do the memorandum ourselves. Nobody would know we were doing it. We pretended we were working above ground and said, this is a bad agreement. You ought to tear it up and burn it in front of the mess hall. So all the prisoners came down, threw the agreement in there, burned it up, and we made a better one. And it was way too far shooting for the moon. And the administration said, no, you're not going to get none of that. You guys write it again. So we wrote another one, and it stuck. And for about 3 years, it stuck in that prison and changed the whole prison system. And nobody knew who us six were who were writing the bomb, underground bomb. But also, I was a Panther at that time. And in the first position of the Panther is we want to set our own destiny as it for our community. So I plugged that into what I was doing. I'm a Panther working with these Canadians who have no idea what a Panther is, And there was another guy, one white guy out of one white guy. Canadians were white too, but anyway, you kind of separated them. But anyways, when I got out, they finally had the thing moving, the movement in prison going, and I got moved out to go to Seattle, and that's when I ran across the George Jackson Brigade. And I put together what we were doing in the bomb. It was just a paper bomb, but they were building a bomb. And we were also doing propaganda in that paper. And Ed was terrific at propaganda. I mean, he's as far as I'm concerned, the greatest propagandist in the world. And so he's doing propaganda, and to sell his propaganda, he needed the bomb back. He didn't know it was armed propaganda. He created something totally different. In fact, I think it was a month ago, I think he said somebody in Europe had the same idea about hitting a substation. They were union workers to get changes made. It worked, same as it worked in Seattle. And just again, recently, there was another big substation explosion, and it's the same thing happened. We didn't. I don't think we started it, but it's a good idea spread around. It's obvious. If you want attention, you have to have armed struggle, not a gun going after anybody. This is the explosion. You could do it with just plain fireworks, huge fireworks, and do it. But Ed liked to get into little details of making a bomb from the gun. He came to my apartment and showed me how to build a bomb. I mean, he had a plate. It was a little gunpowder on it. He showed how you hooked up this wire and the flash bulb and batteries and et cetera, and how when the clock and how when the hand went around, it had contact and the little powder would go poof. He said, that's the way we're going to do it inside the bomb. But he showed us he had the skills for that. I had the skills for, organizing prisoners. For 3 years, I've organized prisoners. This is a prisoners movement we started. But I just shot ahead real quick. But going back to prison, it all started really with that movie about Jim Brown and Rocco Welch. They were telling us what we couldn't do. We're going to choose our own destiny. And not our own, but when we got involved, the destiny of the prison, if they knew they were, it's kind of like a Harriet Tubman. She said, if I freed 300 slaves, and I'd have freed more if they only knew they were slaves. And the same thing, prisoners, prisoners were the same way. We, in a sense, for that little instant, we had freed prisoners. We started freeing them. And we'd have freed a hell of a lot more if they only knew they were prisoners, And so when I got out, I started a prison movement, kept it going until the very end.
How many Panthers were there at Walla Walla? Like
we had about 22 Panthers in Walla Walla.
Oh.
We had where the Seattle Panthers came in to meet us, and they brought with a doctor named Dr. Green, and he tested that whole institution for sickle cell anemia. Yeah, that was the first testing like that had ever gone on in a prison.
Okay.
Back in Seattle, the Panthers set up a clinic headed by Dr. Green was a doctor out of University of Washington. He said, "What are you guys trying to do?" He said, "We want a clinic here, and they got the Band-Aids and whatever, things, little things like that." He said, "No, you guys need a real clinic." He's come out to University of Washington, back a truck up to that warehouse. I'll be waiting for you. So they went over there and backed it up, and he loaded them up with everything, operating tables, all of the medications they need, the bandages, and took it all back to Seattle. They set up a clinic, and it exists to this day. So
I love hearing all this.
That's a good story.
Janine, I'd like to talk about what it was like when you got released.
When I got released?
Start with Janine.
Oh, this last time, huh?
For you, it'll be the last time. But Janine, what was it like when you got released? Where, how was it finding housing, work, and then what led to your work on the ADA?
I had a lot of support when I got released too, and I got released to California and went to work for the prison parenting program that we got started in the prison. And it was in Oakland and actually done, I had enough community support that it was pretty much easy to find housing and transportation.
Did you struggle with work at all?
No, how struggle with work? You mean finding work?
Yes.
No, I went to work. I went to work for that's why I went to Oakland because
Oh,
I had
okay,
a job
okay.
there.
I misunderstood. My bad. Will you tell us like what started with the ADA, like how you got involved with that and your role in it?
Yeah, for one thing, I was becoming disabled, but I had a partner in Washington, D.C. who was one of the leaders of the National Disability Movement. And so I got involved with writing and doing work on disability rights. And also there's a parallel between prisons and other institutions. If you look at what our society wants to do with disabled people, it's lock us all up in nursing homes. And nursing homes and psych facilities and prisons are very similar. In fact, I think the abolition movement should really expand to the other institutions in the society because they're all extremely oppressive.
Yeah, oh yeah. Thank you. Mark, if you can tell us about the last release you had, like what that was like, how it felt to you, the support you had, just things like that, what it was like to be released this last time.
Well, I didn't really want to get released. I mean, I thought it.
You did. It's
I
true.
had did a 30-year term with the feds, and I had 2 more life terms to do for the state. It's consecutive.
Yeah.
And I was just planning on doing little stuff inside prisons, continuing movement inside the prison. So, but Ed and the people in Seattle decided they wanted me out, and they started a support Mark Cook organization with a t-shirts
So that's certain.
and all, yeah, handouts. And it wasn't just in Seattle, it was raised kind of around the United States. The money came in from around in support, and they well over I'd say $20,000, really short period of time. I was examined by 2 state psychiatrists inside and pretty much they said I should never be out. They hired a psychiatrist from the streets, and he presented his uh, uh, position, and he said the paperwork that the state's using, those things are outdated. They don't use those anymore. And so finally, the pro board said they would let me loose, but I never showed remorse for shooting that cop. And so before that ever happened, I had written a letter because I was back in the state and I'm doing life and never getting out. So I'm going to write to this cop and I tell him, I never really intended to kill you. I just wanted to get my prisoner out. That was kind of in the letter. It was a long letter.
Right back.
Attorney supporting me rewrote the letter. But anyways, what happened was when they said they didn't want me out because they never showed any remorse, talking to me, my attorney nudged me about the letter. And I said, that's just between me and the cop. They got nothing to do with the pro board. She said, let them see it. So she got the letter, let them see it. And they looked at it and they said, well, we think we're going to turn you loose in 1 year if you can act right. I've never had an infraction for 24 years, right? I'm in prison. Never when I wanted. I had one, of course, walking the wrong way on a grass lawn. But anyways, that don't count. And so they said that 1 more year, I got out. When I got out, I was handed $8,000. There was a lot of money they put into this thing, hiring psychiatrists and everything. They paid for them, but they handed me $8,000.
Weren't
I had a
Cynthia
place
and
to.
Ed very involved?
Yeah, Ed was there right up front. Ed was making the propaganda, doing street theater, burning up a coffin and etc. Out on the street. He really. Ed's a wonderful guy. You'd love to have met him. But anyways, I had a great when I got a place to stay, the car, they got me a job. So everything was swinging, and I was back into my prison movement again. Oh, but go ahead. Yeah.
So a general theme that I've heard from you both is wild support, like people really showing up and the community really showing up. So one of the viewer questions is essentially asking, why do you think that isn't as strong nowadays? So prisoner support doesn't seem as tangible, as vocal, as mobile as it seemed to be in your and previous times. Do you have an opinion on why that is or what could be done to improve it? Both of you too, like whoever wants to start.
Okay. The strongest movement out here has lasted for years and it's progressing from the labor movement to unions. And we see it today where this nut in working with Trump has fired people. It's a workers' movement against, and it's in demand. It's greater demand now. The prison movement was just part of it. That's what drew me into it. But it's all the workers' movement that's really pushing everybody now. They're tired of all this money we make for people, and they just keep it for themselves and never give it to the workers. Everybody should have a job, have an affordable job if they want one. The money's there, and there's a lot of work to be done. So there's a lot of work there. This is a class struggle. I wore my wrong hat today. I had a class struggle hat on. By the way, I should have worn it. But this is class struggle. This is the whole thing. What we're talking about here, you can water it down. That's where the movement is headed. And everybody isn't jumping off into it. Our politicians aren't helping. All of our politicians have been bought off by these promoters, you know. They buy people to lose. They pay them to lose positions. I'm talking too much.
Question.
Go ahead.
You are ever talking too much.
Would
Well, did
The
you
question
have
was-
similar
Excuse
support
me.
to other people in prison, or do you feel like you had more support than your other people in prison who weren't political prisoners?
I
Like,
had way more support. And I
Yeah.
think it's because of the Seattle community
Because of you were a political
Yeah.
prisoner?
and because I was a political prisoner.
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
And I think that's true for you too, Mark.
Mhm.
It wasn't just Ed and Cynthia. It was,
It was a movement outside.
yeah.
And in Seattle. So go ahead.
Janine, I don't know if you're still involved like in the prisoner support movement broadly, but do you feel that it has do you feel that it is as strong today as it was when you and Mark and everyone else was inside?
I don't know enough about it because I'm not involved with it, but I doubt that it's as strong as it was then, or at least it was at least in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
And also in the Bay Area, it was very strong. And I don't think it is today.
Okay. I started when I got out of prison. To this day, the Owls movement. I helped found what we call the Owls movement, organized workers and laborers. Again, I'm back on the labor thing. It exists, and we have it every month. You know, we meet together. We our fundraising. We just pass a hat, and we have enough money to keep this thing going every month. I mean, I'm in my 80s, almost my 90s now, but I haven't stopped working toward this, trying to push these people into a workers' movement. The main thing to drive this country back where it should be has been taken over. Like I said, it's a class struggle. It's the rich against the poor, and the poor are generally workers, you know, as a working class. I know it sounds a little dry to say something like that, but I'd never given up on that, you know. I'm just a part of this movement.
Eat the rich.
Yeah, eat the rich, kick the ass for the working class. All right.
Mark, I don't know if you'll remember this, but about 9 years ago, you were in Denver for a political prisoner conference, and Lynn Stewart was there, Kazi was there, and my wife was the photographer for that.
Mhm.
And so she's got all these pictures of you with Lynn Stewart.
Oh yeah.
Remember Lynn or whatever, but
Yeah, I was just reading the letter I had
house.
just a couple of days ago that she sent me. Yeah, she's passed now, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you have any memories of Lynn Stewart? Like, did you guys get to spend time together?
Like I said, just a couple of days ago, I'm rereading a lot of letters that were sent to me when I got out. I have never got to the letters. I maybe have money in those things, you know, but I've been sitting down reading with some people. Yeah, Lynn Stewart. Yeah, I used to have her picture up on my wall with the prisoners on.
Yes. Did you ever meet her, Janine?
Pardon?
Did you
I
ever
did
meet
not meet
Lynn?
her.
No. Did you feel like were there movement lawyers back then that like backed you all up, or was it just like the community support?
Community support, although they would pull lawyers in if they were needed.
Yeah. What about you, Mark?
Well, lawyers are really close to my movement. In fact, I ended up working in the public defenders when they got out. That's the job.
That's right.
Yeah. But Ed's wife was his last, not his last wife, but his second wife was a lawyer. I worked with the lawyer. She's a social worker, Cynthia Scow.
Did either of you two ever write for Prison Legal News?
Right. What?
For
No.
Prison Legal News?
Oh, that's Ed. That was Ed's
That was
creation.
Ed's paper.
Yeah. Okay. So, and when I got to Monroe, I worked with it too. And right now, Paul Wright, he's the one that heads it up right now. But and yeah, we were sour on Paul, but he made it something that that probably reaches more people than we could have reached in prison. We wrote up for prisoners by prisoners. That was never to leave the prison. That was like the bomb. It's something prisoners created. But it's out now, and I've been heard judges who are applauding it. Some of the stuff we put in it, made synopsis easy for prisoners to find in this appeal on it. But go ahead, what you're saying.
I mean, I was just curious because I knew Ed wrote it, and it is huge inside right now.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, like I
yeah.
had 20 or 30 people that had subscriptions.
Yeah.
But they do
We
not.
they fought us like hell trying to keep us from printing that thing. And that's it started off kind of an underground thing and we got it going. Me and Paul Wright, before I got out, we got together and we filed a class action suit, and the court said, we're not taking that as a class action suit. They were changing the laws in Seattle, making things hard for prisoners. And so we decided we're going to do an underground, boilerplate complaint. And so we had to do a lot of underground work, breaking into the offices, then getting the printers rolling, et cetera, and spreading it around the state of Washington to tell the prisoners, mail it to this court. And finally, the court said, all right, it's a class action suit. That was like the last great movement before I got out of prison. Yeah, but Paul Wright and us, and he got out later on. He was in Seattle for a while. He comes up back every once in a while to see us.
Janine, what would, if there is anything, what would you like people today to know about consequence awareness or what prison is like? Like what your prison experience is like, what other people could expect? Like what would you say to young radicals today?
I'd say don't just talk about revolution, make one. And I think prisons are getting worse. And that fighting and organizing is more important than ever. I think basically I agree with Mark about class struggle being the issue and worker organizing, and organizing in prison with workers, with other prisoners as workers, is a really great thing to act on. But outside, make a revolution and take over.
Go for it. When you were doing your actions, Janine, was prison ever at the front of your mind? Like, were you prepared or expecting to go inside?
I don't know if it was ever at the front of my mind, but I certainly was aware that it was a good possibility.
Yeah. Did that ever scare you? Were you ever like, "Oh, I don't want to, this might," or was it all?
Oh, I never thought that I could hardly wait to get there, but no, it didn't. It didn't really frighten me.
Okay.
It was just an is.
Yeah. The pain of prison. That's what I'm afraid of. The pain. I'm not just afraid of it. If there's no pain, it doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
I've lived it. What is it, 60 years? No, 40 years of my life or more in prison. So 2/3 of my life. And so I know it well. I know the rotten son of the bitches are in there, and I know there's some good people that want to help, And I know the same way I look at the prisoners, there's prisoners that want to help, and there's other prisoners who are working against them constantly.
Constantly.
Yeah.
Mark,
It's
would
a
you have
struggle.
a message for young radicals today about like what to expect or what prison was like or anything along those lines?
No last word for them? No. There has to be a smoother transition from prison out into the working class. And that slavery thing they have is causing more crime than they realize. If they had a smooth transition from prison right into the society, not from slavery, but having people paid for work they're doing inside. And if they come out, they're going to be looking for more raise in salary. So when they come out, it'd be much smoother. And when you talk about the sex workers, if that's not going to get them anywhere in life, there ought to be some kind of smooth transition built for women to get into work before going into that, so they can move on up, and that'll kill crime in a lot of ways. You can always find people who can profit from crime, and generally those are upper class people. I'm telling you, they never go to jail, but they make millions and billions breaking the law. The lower classes won't break the law if they have a job. We're working class people from cradle to grave. That's what if you want to go that way, you'll find fun time to have fun and play too.
I
But
was really shocked when I got out, seeing because I was in the halfway house for just a little bit. But I was really shocked to see how many people were released from prison with nothing. No money, no clothes, no
right.
toothbrush. And then the only jobs they could get were standing out in the cold holding a construction street sign or janitors.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you just reminded me of, that like there's no pipeline to success from
Exactly. Yeah. And they got the money for it. They throw money away on some of the dumbest stuff. Yeah. And if you getting rid of prisoners, complain about prisons. If they got prisoners working, they'd make more money from the taxes they're getting from the prisoners. Pay them a fair wage. They just don't see that far.
I was paid $15 basically a day. I made $12 a month. I don't know if that was the same when you all were in. Just miserable wages.
Yeah.
Yeah. If anything, right.
Right.
Yeah.
Before we go, I would like to ask if you all have anything going on right now, anything you want to talk about or promote or just stress to people. Like now would be a good chance just to put that out there.
Well, they got a good movement going right now. They don't know it, in that place where the healthcare worker or healthcare giant was killed, and this thing where there's Musk or Elon, he's throwing jobs, firing people by the hundreds of thousands. There's a movement going right now. If they should give it support to it, there's some people that they're saying stay away from it because it's violent, but they got the attention that they hate. No, they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to get the attention that way by shooting somebody in the back, and they didn't want it by burning up cars, because they're not getting anything out of burning up those cars or anything. But they're making a loud voice. It's been heard, and people could hook onto that just like Vietnam or anything else and move. They got a good thing going. It's happening in different areas where they're finally attacking that working class. I mean, the upper class, and the working class is doing it. It's a hard job getting across to them. Wish Ed was back. We get our armed propaganda going again.
I love it.
Okay, the next one.
I was really proud to see Kansas City, where I'm from. Historically, it hasn't always showed up in those sort of ways. So when I saw the Tesla dealership burning in Kansas City, I was so happy.
Yeah.
Like, well done, hometown. Well done.
I'll tell you, that is armed propaganda.
Yeah, get after it. Like, get people involved, get people interested in what's happening.
Yes.
Yeah. Janine, do you have anything going on? Anything you're working on or anything you want to talk about?
No, I don't have anything today. I'll do what Mark said. Huh? No.
Fair enough. One last, we have a viewer question, and they said that, are there any like out groups right now that you're all inspired by or seeing? Because to them, it feels like the working class has kind of gone maybe right and isn't leaning towards like leftism like it maybe did in the past. So is there anything along those lines you're seeing or feeling?
No, no, I've been looking to, I've been looking for it, seeing how I can help, because I always got a little bit of money to throw that way when something is happening. Yeah.
Janine?
I'd like to see things happening, and I think it is going too right wing, but also maybe it's the heightening of contradictions. So I keep being hopeful, thinking there will be more organizing because of the predominance of the right wing. But there's just a lot of pain to get there.
Do you all, I don't know if you have an opinion on this, but when you all went in, there wasn't really the internet. So do you feel that today that the internet has helped like spread class consciousness and struggle, or do you think it's been a detriment because of all the bullshit propaganda?
I hate to be judgmental, but that's just what I was thinking, that it is causing more problems than
Yeah.
anything. It's not, people aren't getting out, they're looking at their hand. They're walking to a bus and looking at their hand. Their
We're
cell phone
not
in their
talking to
hand.
each other.
Walk down a manhole. I
Mhm.
mean, yeah, they're not looking up and seeing what's happening in the world, what's happening to them. Yeah.
I was really shocked when I got out to see, like, I obviously, like, I was around when the internet's around, but I was really shocked to see, like, the proliferation of far right bigotry and hate, and just how normalized it had gotten because of memes and the internet and stuff like that. It was really startling to me. So before we go, I just want to thank you both for real. I I didn't know about the George Jackson Brigade before I went inside, but when I was reading the books and reading the zines, reading Ed's book where he's talking about getting a gun smuggled in to fight racism,
Mhm.
The way that you all carried anti-racism and class struggle and all those things together and acted on them, I think is just unbelievably inspirational. And I hope that people take what you all did, not just what you said, but did, and carry those things forward. And it's just been a real honor and a pleasure talking to both of you for real. Please, people, write prisoners, write someone inside today. Support them.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Please. So, Mark,
Thanks, Eric.
Janine,
All right.
thank you both so much.
All right, sure.
Thanks,
Very
y'all. It's
important.
been a huge pleasure. I was furiously making notes on things to read up on after the conversation. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day. It's been a fantastic talk.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care, folks.
Bye.